Hey everybody, my name is Brandon. Welcome back to Cinefessions, where we talk all things media. Way back in 2004, I fell in love with Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. It came out a year after the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, which I have referenced more times than I care to admit on this channel. And because of these two movies, I will always give remakes a chance. So since falling in love with it in the theaters, I've bought this movie on DVD, and then I upgraded eventually to the standard Blu-ray release. Well, then, of course, Scream Factory comes along with this amazing collector's edition, so you know I had to buy that one. Well, this week, Scream Factory has upgraded this yet again to the 4K release. So I did it again. This is the fourth time I've bought this movie. But the question is this 4K upgrade worthwhile? And will I have to buy this again in the future? Let's talk about it a little bit here. So I will be talking about Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead on 4K today. Before we do that though, if you have a quick second, hit that like button down below. That engagement really does help me out. But with that said, let's not waste any more time at all. Let's dive right into my 4K review of Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. I've seen Dawn of the Dead 2004 a lot now, but this time through, I actually caught a couple of things that I never did before, or at least that I forgot about before. So this, of course, is directed by Zack Snyder, but it's written by James Gunn, who I adore. I love him as a director and a writer. And not only that, this actually has costuming done by David Cronenberg's late sister, Denise Cronenberg. She actually passed away back in 2020, but I had no idea that he even had a sister, let alone that she was in the costuming department of Hollywood. On top of that, I noticed Heather Langenkamp, Nancy. I noticed her name, Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street, is on this in the credits as well. She does some of the makeup, most specifically the prosthetics for this film. So the fact that you have David Cronenberg's sister and Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street, along with James Gunn on the behind the scenes of this movie, is remarkable. And frankly, I just never noticed it before. Did you guys know that? Let me know down below. Alright, with that useless bit of trivia aside, let's talk Dawn of the Dead. So, this is a zombie survival film, and it's as simple as that. We are following a group of people as they are trying to survive this zombie outbreak that has occurred. They end up coming together. There's a nurse, a cop, played by Ving Rhames, the nurse played by Sarah Polley. There is Mekhi Phifer in this as well. I don't really know what he does. It's implied that he might be a thief of some sort. His wife or girlfriend in there as well, who's pregnant, of course, because you have to have a pregnant person in this. And then there's some various other people. There's a Best Buy salesman as well, which is so funny. But anyway, we are following them as they make their way to this mall. And that's where the entirety of this, the majority of this film takes place, is in this mall, which of course has been abandoned except for a group of security officers who are still in the mall. And it essentially is them trying to coexist with each other while keeping the zombies out and figuring out what in the world it is that they're going to do next. Is help coming, or do they need to try to find their way to a new destination which might be more of a safe haven? That's what we're following here. You've probably already seen this one, so I feel like that's probably a good enough synopsis for Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead has some incredible set pieces in it. There are some scenes in this movie that have just stuck with me ever since I first saw them in theaters back in 2004, almost 20 years ago now, which is absolutely mind-blowing. 19 years this year. Crazy. Anyway, like the opening sequence where we have an overhead shot of our main character, Sarah Polley's character, trying to escape her neighborhood after she finds out there's this outbreak going on. And then there's a car crash that ends in an explosion, and it's all done in an overhead shot that is just amazing to look at. I did notice the CGI a little bit more on that opening overhead shot this time through on the 4K than I may have in the past, but that's totally fine. It was great. There is some other just amazing set pieces here, especially towards the end of the film, which again, no spoilers in this review, so I won't talk about those in particular, but just some really great scenes in this that have stuck with me and continue to through this day. I also love some of the small cameos that are in here. You get Ken Foree playing the individual who says the famous line, "When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth." He's fantastic. That, of course, in the unrated cut. I don't think that's in the theatrical cut, if I'm not mistaken, but honestly, I've seen the theatrical cut when I watched it in theaters, but ever since then, I've watched the unrated. So to me, the unrated cut is like the version of the movie, so I'm not 100% sure what the differences are. And then on top of that, you also have Tom Savini playing the local sheriff who basically reveals the fact that you have to shoot them in the head in order to kill them. And he's just so great in this role. It's so small, but it's memorable. One, because it's Tom Savini, and as a horror fanatic, we all know who that is, much like Ken Foree. And so it's just fun. So not a ton of cameos in this, but what's there is super impactful, and I love that about this movie. Just the whole premise of Dawn of the Dead works so well for me. A group of people being trapped in a mall in order to survive. Like, I love that. I love survival films. I love one location movies like this. And what's really cool about the mall is, even though it's a one location film, it doesn't really feel like it because you have all these different stores which are filled with just a variety of different things. And so it feels like there's different places for them to go, which keeps it interesting the entire time. So I love the setting of this. I love it in the original as well. Honestly, it might be even better in the original because it's like a 1970s mall, which is a lot different than an early 2000s mall. But either way, they're fantastic. And this one is particularly nostalgic for me because in the early 2000s, I spent a ridiculous amount of time in the mall with my friends. You know, I was in high school, so that's just what you did back then, at least. Not now, obviously, because malls are dying, but either way, I loved it. And so it's very nostalgic to go back and watch this. Another moment that just works so well in this movie and has stuck with me since I was a teenager watching this, and you probably know why if you've seen the movie, but it's the crooner version of Down with the Sickness and that montage that goes on there.
Get up, come on, get down with the sickness.
But it's still so great today. Like, it's so much fun to watch, just the different things that are going on in there. And it's kind of, helps pass the time a little bit. So we get a little bit later on with these group of survivors in the mall. But just that song to me is iconic and I love it. The action in this is fantastic. The gore is awesome as well, especially in the unrated version. You just get more blood splatter, and it's always fun to have more blood splatter in your zombie film. As the movie progresses, you get a lot of bigger set pieces towards the end, a lot more boomier set pieces at the end, which again are a lot of fun to watch. And oh man, they looked amazing on this 4K release, which again I'll talk about when I talk about the AV side. But yeah, the explosions in this were so much fun. It felt like watching them for the first time, back in the theaters. That was so great to see. If there's any negative to this film, it's that the characters aren't very deep at all. It is definitely archetypal characters, but honestly, like, it's a zombie survival film. Who cares? I'm not there to, have immaculate character growth and learn a ton about these characters. What I know about them is fine. And really, it's about how they're going to survive against the zombies, and that's enough for me. And so because of that, I just love this movie. So I'm just ranting about how great this is, but that's what I've been doing since, for 19 years now because I love it. So I'm going to leave my review of the film there and just say, if you haven't seen it, you absolutely have to. I love this movie. So I am giving Dawn of the Dead from 2004, 4.5 out of 5 stars. All right, so let's talk about the 4K release itself here. So this is the slipcover, and honestly, it's not nearly as good as the collector's edition Blu-ray slipcover, but it is what it is. If you take the slipcover off, you're going to get the exact same art on the front and the exact same information on the back, to be expected. When you open it up, this is good because it is a 3-disc set, and each disc has its own spindle. I will admit, when I got it, this was off. This is not one of those spindles that holds the disc very well. At least in my experience, it hasn't held it very well. But anyway, the 3 discs here are 2 Blu-rays. The first one has the theatrical cut. The second one has the unrated cut on Blu-ray. And the third disc is the unrated cut on 4K. The only special features on the 4K disc is the commentary track itself. Nothing else is on the 4K disc. All of the other special features are on the Blu-ray disc. So something to keep in mind there. So that's what this one looks like. Again, I think the Blu-ray slipcover looks a lot better than this. And because you're already getting the standard poster on the inside as the normal cover art, I would have loved something different for the 4K slipcover. But they just haven't been doing that on these 4K releases for whatever reason. So with that in mind, let's jump over to the AV side of this because that's really why we're here. I'll start with the audio side just because nothing's changed, unfortunately. This is the same DTS HD Master Audio 5.1 track that was included on the Blu-ray release. And from everything I've read about it, there's no difference to it at all. So that's a little bit unfortunate, but honestly, it sounds totally fine. I had no issues hearing anything. The dialogue is mixed well. The explosions sound really good. And I'll also mention there is a 2.0 stereo track. if for whatever reason you want to use that versus the 5.1 track, but I think the 5.1 sounds great. I would have loved a Dolby, a Dolby Atmos addition or upgrade rather on this one, but unfortunately that's just not in the card. So on the audio side, you get that DTS HD Master Audio 5.1 track that has been there previously. Jumping over to the video side of the disc though, that's what's worth talking about because that's where the upgrades were made. So there was a new 4K scan done from the original negatives. Now the only caveat to that is that the unrated footage is still from the 2K digital intermediate. So the unrated moments are not done in 4K, they're done in 2K and upscaled. But honestly, as someone who, like I said before, has really only watched the theatrical once and then has always watched the unrated, I don't know exactly what scenes are which, and so I didn't even notice a difference between the two different scenes. So keep that in mind. Your mileage may vary there, but for me, I didn't really notice too much of a big difference when it was 4K versus when it was 2K upscaled. On top of that, this does have a Dolby Vision color grade as well, which is how I watched it, so that's what I'll be referencing throughout this review. This was actually a 4K disc I was super interested in checking out because when I watched the Blu-ray release of this from Scream Factory, this has the 2K digital intermediate scan on it, and this one honestly had so much film grain on it that I found it a little bit distracting. It was so noisy that I was taken aback. Now, please don't get me wrong. I understand this was shot on film. This should have film grain in it, and the 4K transfer does, but it is a noticeable difference. It did not take me out of the film. It did not feel distracting like that Blu-ray did, that original Blu-ray from Scream Factory did. This looks a lot more natural. It looks more realistic, I guess, just in terms of the film grain. I'll talk about that, the realistic side of things in just a minute. But in terms of the film grain, this is a remarkable upgrade from that old Scream Factory 2K digital intermediate upgrade. With that said about the film grain, let's talk about the rest of the image quality on this, because this one really took me back when I first started watching it. And then I realized it's not the 4K transfer. The 4K transfer, they do a great job with it. What's weird about it though is the color grading. It's stylized in such a way, a 2004 way by Zack Snyder, that it just looks, honestly, not that great in the beginning of this movie. There are some shots that are just completely blown out. There are moments when the characters are kind of standing with the sun behind them, with the sky behind them, the blue sky. Blue sky, it's more of a tinted sky given the color grading, but you know what I'm talking about. And some of the characters, like some of them were wearing black, and it was just completely blown out to me. It looked terrible. And I was thinking, like, is this the 4K transfer? What's going on here? Well, no, it's not. Because as the movie progresses, that stylization goes down a little bit, or it changes enough that it doesn't have that same effect throughout the entire film. And the rest of the movie, I was really able to appreciate that 4K transfer. But that said, you have to keep in mind when you put this on, it's not going to look like a normal 4K transfer would from a movie today, or even like a 60s or 70s or 80s movie. This is an early 2000s movie that is stylized to the max with color grading done crazy, and so it's going to show that. As a bit of an experiment, I actually went back to the 2017 Scream Factory Blu-ray to check that out. I looked at the scene where there's the one-armed zombie running up to them at the back of the mall when they're first trying to get into the mall, just for reference. And man, oh man, the film grain is crazy. And so that was really where I looked to see how the film grain changed. And so I watched that, and then I moved over to this Blu-ray here on the new 4K transfer. And then finally, of course, watched the 4K transfer of that same scene back to back to back. And what I noticed as I went through these is not only does the film grain look more natural as you progress through, but there's also a moment, a super quick moment, where we get a shot of our Best Buy salesman's face. In this 2017 Blu-ray, the blacks are crushed so much that you almost don't make out his face at all. But then we get over to the new 2022 4K release, and his face is crystal clear. Yes, it is dark as it's supposed to be, but you can make out the details in his face that are just completely crushed when you go back to the 2017 release. So for me, that was just one example that I looked at where I could see a noticeable difference from the 2017 Blu-ray release up through the new 4K transfer. It looks awesome in that regard. And not only that, but some of the detail in the characters' faces when you get close-ups is amazing. Like just the shot of Ving Rhames, he's so intimidating, and the detail on his face makes him even more so. Like, I love that. And just other sequences like that look really good. But the best term I can use to describe this, I guess, would be inconsistent. Because in the beginning, it looks a certain way that's like, man, does this even look that great? But then as the movie progresses, you realize, yes, it does. That's intended. So keep that in mind if you're, deciding whether to buy this one or not. You might have some hit or miss sequences in there. But again, keep in mind, what 4K does best is deliver the director's intention, or at least that's what it should do best. And I think that's exactly what this one does really well. So though it does look kind of awkward in some moments, I think this is exactly what Zack Snyder intended in order to stylize the film. So keep that in mind going into this, but I thought it looked really good. So for the AV side of things, because the audio is the exact same soundtrack we've had before, and there's some inconsistencies with the visual quality, I'm going to have to land on a 3.5 out of 5 stars for the AV side of this disc. I'm not going to rate the special features on this disc just because they're the exact same special features that were available on this 2017 Blu-ray. So if you've already watched all those, then you've seen everything that is available to you on this new release here, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. This is still a really packed release, and we're not going to find anything else that's more feature rich. I'm sure of that. So if this is one that you have seen, unfortunately, there's nothing new, but if you've not picked this up in the past, or you just skipped the Scream Factory release, then you have a whole lot of really cool special features to go through here. This was actually a very difficult 4K review for me to complete, because normally when I do these, it's very obvious why this 4K was an upgrade from a previous release. In this instance, it was a little bit difficult for me to find that, at least in the first 30 minutes. I was thinking, man, this actually kind of stands out more for looking so odd. And it took me a little bit longer to realize that this is actually exactly how it's intended. As the film progressed and I was able to appreciate some more close-ups, less stylization as the film goes on, and especially those explosions as we get later in this film, I really appreciated the work that was put into this 4K transfer. So, do I recommend this one or not? That is going to be completely up to you. If you don't own this movie, this is the way to get it. Or if you only own the original Blu-ray or the DVD, this is absolutely worth an upgrade. If you own the 2017 Blu-ray, if you think it looks fine with all that film grain, you can probably hold off on upgrading because the special features are exactly the same. But if you were like me and thought, man, the visual quality on this is a little bit distracting, the 4K transfer is definitely an upgrade. This is the best that this film is going to look. I have to assume that this is exactly what Zack Snyder's intention was for this movie. I can't be one of those people that says it looked how I saw it in theater. It looked like how I saw it in theaters, because that was 19 years ago. I haven't the slightest idea what it looked like when I saw it in theaters. I just remember the moments, that opening car crash with the explosion, the crooner song of Down with the Sickness, the finales, the explosion. That's what I remember seeing in this, seeing this movie 19 years ago, not the visual image quality. So I can't lie to you and say it looks exactly how I remember it, because I don't remember. But I will say it looks great once you can get past and once you can understand that this is exactly what it's supposed to look like because it's stylized in that way. So, that's a lot of words for me to say that I will give this Scream Factory release of Dawn of the Dead on 4K 3.5 out of 5 stars. Wow, that was a marathon filming session, over an hour. I've just reached the hour mark in my filming. Hopefully when I post this, it's like 20 minutes long, but that was a difficult review. I'm going to be completely honest and let you know I had a hard time talking about that one, but let me know down in the comments below. Am I completely off base? Am I just missing something in this first 30 minutes of this movie that actually does look amazing and I'm completely wrong? Let me know what you think down below. Are you picking this upgrade up or maybe waiting on it? If my review swayed you in any way, let me know that as well. Anything down there really helps. So thank you guys so much for all your support. I really do appreciate it. And I love hearing from you. So leave those comments. But as always, if you guys enjoyed this one, hit that like button down below. If you didn't like it, hit that thumbs down. That lets me know, where I need to improve. So I appreciate that also. And like I always say, I don't just talk movies. I talk all things media. Books, movies, video games, graphic novels, manga, records. If it's media related, I'm interested in it. And if you are too, you might consider subscribing. All right, guys. So that's going to do it for today. I just want to say thank you all so much for watching, and I want to encourage you to consume some media today. I'll catch you next time.